player housing has been out a few days at this point. Actually, in fact, we are towards the end of the first week of our player housing. Technically, yes, we're still talking about early access player housing, since not all of the feature will be out in The War Within. They will come out in full fashion with the release of Midnight. However, there is already a question we need to try to be answering about this game activity, about this game mode. And the question that needs to be answered is the replayability. Because while right now, of course, most players that are enjoying player housing will be busy trying to collect as much as they can, pretty much, having to go through collecting, for example, old faction, old rep, even old currencies required for different housing decor items, having to complete different achievements, some of you having to sigh and get depressed because you have to earn some honor to get some decor items. However, obviously what was clear is that eventually, in just a few days, perhaps the toughest of you, a few weeks, you will have gathered most of what you can already gather from player housing, and you will have assembled your ideal house, and there won't be too much left to do. Even if you imagine, for example, the best case scenario where this feature keeps you busy for 2 full months, that is not even enough to last until the next expansion actually comes out. So the question is, what would you even be doing at the beginning of the next expansion, for example, when it comes to your house? How many times can you assemble your house after you have collected some 90+% of the decor items you could have collected right now? How much more can you keep reinventing your house and keep it somewhat of a fresh and exciting experience every day or every week? Like, for example, if you were to do Mythic Plus or raids or any kind of activity players do on a daily or on a weekly basis, if you wanted to treat this activity like player housing as another one of these endgame activities on a more casual level, then the question is, okay, but what keeps you playing? What keeps you playing again? So we do know there is one thing that is definitely going to be new, that is coming in the actual expansion in Midnight, which is the Endeavor system. Now, the Endeavor system is very similar to the Trader's Tender progress bar you have to fill every month by using a myriad of different activities to fill the bar, and at the end of the bar you get your reward. Now, we don't exactly know what kind of reward you could be getting when it comes to housing, because right now when it comes to housing you pretty much have more points you can spend for your decor, or possibly unique decor items, right? Unique interior or exterior items as a reward. But either way, it works in a similar way. The unique thing about this system, to highlight once more, it shouldn't really be focusing, instanced content, grouped content, or any kind of competitive content in PvE or PvP, is the fact that to fill this bar, back in the beta of this system, the data mining did not suggest any instance content, for example. These were the tasks you could do to gather the community coupons you needed to fill this bar. And as you can see, all of these activities have nothing to do with essentially instance content. It's a whole bunch of defeat rares in the open world, complete world quests, daily quests, zone objectives in the open world. There is a bunch of things about fishing, about cooking, more things related to the open world. Many of these things are tied to the initiatives, because you get to choose as a community in your neighborhood, because the special thing about these endeavors is that they are not personal, they are tied to your neighborhood. So you get to choose the initiative you want, which is going to be themed around different zones and different regions, like the With Regards to Sporegar will of course be Burning Crusade and Zangar Marsh themed, and then you have the Friends of the Grammys is about the Kunlai, so we are now in Mists of Pandaria, and then you have Holm Sweet Holm, which is back in Deep Holm, so now we are in Cataclysm. So obviously also things like open world objectives will more often than not be themed around these zones and these expansions. So this system, the Endeavor system that is going to come out for the next expansion, will be the new main center activity for this game mode, for player housing. But there is a thing. there's a thing that, just like the trader standard bar you have to fill every month, more often than not, if you just play doing other content, doing the normal content you do by yourself, you would have filled that bar anyways. And what is, important about this is that when it comes to this Endeavor bar filling system, is the fact that it still at the end has nothing to do with, or mostly nothing to do with, actual housing. I would assume you would like as your main goal, if you're enjoying player housing, decorating. Making a house, building a house. So many / the majority of these tasks have nothing to do, of course, with housing. It's about collecting and gathering stuff from the open world. So yes, now you have an Endeavor system. Yes, you get to fill the bar to get some housing rewards, but the filling of the bar itself is still fully open world questing themed, which isn't really relevant to your player housing. It will be like saying, okay, you're a raider, you enjoy raiding, we give you a new renown track for you to get some rewards themed to the raid, and you fill that bar by going and doing daily quests in the open world. That is kind of detached from what you wanted to do with that renown bar, which was raiding, right? In fact, the raiding renown we have gotten in the past 2 seasons, the levels there were earned by you simply killing bosses in the raid. Meanwhile, essentially, this bar you have to fill when it comes to housing and when it comes to the Endeavor system doesn't really have much to do with you building a house itself. So, what I thought as a pretend game developer, which more often than not has better ideas than Blizzard themselves, is the one way to make housing have the most important thing for you to be able to play day in, day out on a daily or weekly basis is repetition, right? Just look at a content which for years became obsolete and sort of became ignored after the first few weeks of an expansion. We are talking about dungeons. Dungeons gave completely obsolete gear just as soon as you got the dungeon gear, or even better, the raid gear, and then suddenly it gained much more relevance once you introduced Mythic Plus in Legion, right? Now, Mythic Plus was nothing more than just repeating the same dungeons over and over, and we saw how popular it became. So, with housing, the question is, how do you make it repeatable? You just built your own house, what do you even repeat? Well, obviously, it would have to be something akin to a weekly competition to build a new house from scratch based on what you could say are affixes from Mythic Plus. So instead of having teeming, overflowing, and necrotic this week, you will have something like flower, red, rocks. So now your 3 affixes for you to build a house this week is a house that is themed on these 3 defining traits. And then after you take in the quest, you take in the challenge, you get your empty plot, you get to build a house from scratch every week, and then other players will get to rate it, just like you will get to rate the houses of other players. And you will get, obviously, increasingly higher rewards based on the rating you get. This, to me, is the only one way to make this repeatable and engaging for players, because I have gotten the idea from looking at the responses of the player base to this game system that what they actually enjoy, surprisingly, for a player housing system is to actually build a house, is to actually decorate the house. Sure, it's nice to have added features to help you grow the options you have for building your house, so the different decors you can gather, right? However, those decor features are all about doing other things that have nothing to do with housing, like collecting things in the open world, in old content, old zones, old regions, old reps. You are effectively not actually playing what you want to play when you do that, because having to go and grind some old meta achievement from Battle for Azeroth to get the decor you need, you are doing it not because you want to do those world quests or grind those factions, you are doing it because you want the decor that you get as a reward, so you can go back to your house and redecorate it with the decor you just earned. So to me, what needs to happen is a repeatable feature, repeatable content around housing. But obviously, since the whole point of player housing is to build a house by yourself, then the repeatable content must be repeating the process of building a house. Preferably not your own house again, a different house, like a challenge. Now, there is some sliver of hope here, because in part of the interviews given by the developers, there was a question, finally a decent one, coming even more surprisingly from IGN, where the question was, how are you thinking about things like housing contests and stuff like that? The interviewer then goes completely off mark, asking, I think about Race to World first, and now that's a tune-in event, and I feel like I would watch an interior decorating show. The devs are, as usual, faux positive, pointing out that, oh, we have seen a bunch of creators pop up that are like, I'm a housing creator, this is what I'm doing, and they're starting to run their own challenges and contests, and that's exciting to see. I think we're all kind of watching that to see what sort of activities the players are getting up to. So they're trying to leave these up to the communities themselves to come up with something like this, but I think this has to be game induced. I think this has to be something that would come from the game itself. A game activity, a game mode, you enter your neighborhood, you have the bulletin board. To the side of the bulletin board, you have the weekly challenge. So you click on the post of the weekly challenge, you click begin, you get to click a new plot. Essentially, you get instanced into a completely empty neighborhood where you get to choose a completely empty plot, and you get to finish the house for the challenge based on the affixes of that week. They could be things themed to race, themed to culture. It could be something like Blood Elf, Red, Water, or something like Orc, Squares, Flowers. And that's your prompt for making a house. It needs to be themed around orcs, flowers, and squares. That's it. I feel like this is what would give you a reason, if you are into player housing, to play every week. Way more than logging in if you're into player housing and knowing that now you have to build up your endeavors, skill points, your endeavor bar, by going and doing some daily quests in Zangar Marsh to fill up the bar. I feel like getting players to do more of what they would enjoy, which is building a house, is more relevant than getting players out in the open world. It's still nice to get players out in the open world and make the world feel alive by having players go and do those things, but on top of that, I do think there needs to be something that makes players naturally and normally want to essentially build multiple houses. Because legitimately right now, you have built the house of your dreams. Thank you very much. You have flooded social media non-stop with all of the posts of the houses you have made, and that's great. But however, once you have finished the house of your dreams, then what do you do? What do you have left to do with housing? Right now, as mentioned in one of the interview for the devs, you don't even have the question to copy paste, basically like a transmog system to completely fully save a house by yourself. So it's not that you can save, load, and change and swap houses at the drop of a hat anyways. And even if you could be able to do that, to what end? What would be the point of saving 10 different house loadouts? To do what? For what purpose? I feel like it's just missing that extra nudge, that extra addition, that extra incentive for you to build these houses. And I think a Blizzard mandated community event on a weekly basis for you to build different themed houses, like you never know which one it is every week, would essentially stimulate your creativity and your imagination in building things perhaps you weren't even planning on building or you weren't even thinking about building. It could also allow players, for example, to double up different factions, right? Even if you're Horde, the challenge would allow you to load in this empty alliance plot and make the alliance house, because this weekly team was based on dwarfs or based on draenei or based on the alliance altogether. So I feel like this would be the correct way to get players to continue to get into player housing. And I'm saying this as a complete neutral, because I myself don't actually care about housing at all. So I was trying to see it from the perspective of someone who would be very into player housing and trying to imagine this as my weekly activity in the game in midnight. Imagine I don't log in every week to do my Mythic Plus keys, to do my raid. Instead, what I'm interested every week to log in for is player housing. right? So right now it's all flowers and sunshine because you've got tons of things to collect, tons of factions to round up if you have missed them in previous expansions. So it looks nice now, but we are like 2.5 months away from the actual expansion release of Midnight. By the time Midnight comes out, you will have likely sorted out all of these things already. So what would a professional, elite, player housing content kind of player actually be doing once Midnight releases? So it's the weekly reset, you log in, you get your Endeavor bar to fill up. This time the theme is Nazmir and Sand and Desert and Vulperas back in BFA, so you have to go there to do a bunch of world quests, dailies and zone objectives and whatnot to fill the bar, which has nothing to do with player housing. The bar gets filled, you get some more housing XP, a couple more new decor pieces. How would that be something that keeps you busy on a daily/weekly basis in terms of content in the game? It just misses something, especially worth highlighting once more. It misses something that is themed around what you actually enjoy doing, which is building houses, not going around the open world to get 1 or 2 rewards themed around player housing. Again, from my completely different foreign perspective, I was trying to look at it from my end and thinking about, oh, I really enjoy doing Mythic Plus, so every week I'm gonna log into the game and now I'm gonna have to do, 3 different world quests, 5 different dailies, and a couple of world objectives back from Cataclysm to earn my keystone to enter Mythic Plus. Yeah, that doesn't feel that nice. Which is the same way I would feel if I were that much into player housing, and then I looked at the content I actually got to in the expansion, and I saw that this is what was available. It feels like the fluff, the filler, the extra side dish content of the open world collecting stuff is fine, is nice, it's whatever. However, it needs the main dish. It needs the housing itself, the player housing itself. You need essentially a reason other than because it looks cool, just like the reason you could have every day to make a new transmog for yourself. You need something extra, right? You need an extra reason for you to be, for example, wanting to build different houses every day, which right now, looking, 2 months into the future, 3 months into the future, 4 months, let alone 1 year into the future, we don't really have. So to me, it seemed like the simplest solution would have been some kind of weekly event, possibly even for the more addicted, a daily event, for you to build different houses based on different RNG themes, for you to come up with different houses every time. I feel like this could definitely be formed by online communities by themselves, but it still wouldn't reach enough of the player base into this kind of content. I feel like if the extra challenge itself came from Blizzard, came from the actual game, it would be much easier to manage, much easier to play around as a player who is into this kind of content. So while we are busy praising player housing for now, I thought it would have been nice to already start thinking about the future, 1 to 2, 3, even 4+ months into the future, into the next expansion, and what could possibly be the daily/weekly content that keeps you playing and keeps you repeating this kind of game mode, player housing. Because it could be, from my foreign perspective of a not that much into player housing kind of player, it does feel like it could be a legitimate endgame activity, or as Blizzard likes to call it, a pillar, an endgame pillar, like arenas and PvP, and then you have raiding, and then you have Mythic Plus. Blizzard tried to add the delve system as another more casual endgame pillar. This one could also be an even more laid back, casual, even or outright different game style, game category of an end game pillar, but you actually need to give it things to do. A competitive mode, a repeatable mode, different flavors, different styles every day, every week, for players to have reasons to build multiple houses, build multiple styles of multiple houses, add things like, of course, titles, achievements, why not, transmogs, mounts, pets, toys, extra special decor, all tied around this weekly or daily activity of building different houses in different styles, etc., to get players to repeat this kind of content. Because otherwise, my impression is that it would fall off too quickly, this kind of activity, without any precise kind of repetition for the game mode. So this is what we have for today when it comes to player housing. Great initial response, however, we kind of want to see a bit more going later down in midnight in the release and then the months following the release of the expansion for things to actually do when it comes to player housing itself. So for today, on this Tuesday, on the eve of another weekly reset, it is now time to leave each other. We're starting the goodbyes as usual by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who has been supporting Competitive for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, nice, perfect. I just tasked yesterday for some snow, getting close to Christmas, and today it's just sun, highest temperature of the past month. Of course.